So this past weekend, Impact Wrestling Hard to Kill was a huge success for Impact Wrestling, and it's already led fans wondering when the next Impact Wrestling pay-per-view event will take place. Of course, it was announced though during the show, during Hard to Kill this past weekend, that Impact Wrestling will be returning to pay-per-view in April, because during the promotion's Hard to Kill pay-per-view event, Impact announced that the next major event will take place on April 24, 2021. Impact will put on its latest incarnation of the Impact Rebellion event. Now, Rebellion started back in 2019, which was main evented by the Lucha Brothers versus the Latin American Exchange in a Full Metal Mayhem match for the Impact World Tag Team Championship. Since then, it's become a yearly staple. However, we didn't get an Impact Rebellion pay-per-view last year, of course, due to the pandemic. Instead, it was a 2-week televised special rather than a pay-per-view event. But as you can see on the logo there, what is getting everyone talking when it comes to Impact Rebellion is that symbol right at the bottom, because as you can see, there is an Omega symbol in the poster. What does that mean? Well, this likely means that AEW World Champion Kenny Omega will once again be appearing on an Impact Wrestling pay-per-view. Will he be in singles action? What's he going to be facing? What kind of match is he going to be in? Who's he going to be facing? Is he going to be facing Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship? I think that's likely going to be the case. I think given the way that Hard to Kill went off of the air on Saturday night. By the way, if you haven't seen Hard to Kill, I mean, it was a really good show. I do think it was an excellent show, considering obviously the circumstances with the pandemic, and considering the circumstances that they haven't taped really any new content or footage since November. That's when their last TV tapings were. Of course, I know since then they did some new footage when it comes to Kenny Omega, but considering all of that, I felt that kicking off 2021 in the way that they have when it comes to Genesis and then Hard to Kill for me really did feel like just not like a reset, because I don't think Impact Wrestling frankly needs a reset. It did feel like Impact Wrestling saying though, look, 2021 is going to be even better than 2020. It did feel like an upgrade to what we've been seeing recently when it comes to Impact Wrestling, just in terms of their Impact Plus events, their television show as well. It did feel like a massive upgrade, just all around. I mean, there's so much you could pick out of why Hard to Kill I think was a good show. I think production-wise, apart from that Ethan Page Karate Man match, I thought it was really, really well done. Obviously, you had D'Lo Brown and Matt Striker on commentary, I think were very good. Obviously, I think they're working out the chemistry there, but I think that as we got further on in the show and as we got towards the end of the show, specifically the main event, I thought they were very, very good. So I thought that was an upgrade. I think having the crowd noise there certainly does help Impact Wrestling a lot. I know that's been a big criticism of people that have been tuning into Impact Wrestling for the first time or returning to Impact because of this AEW and Impact Wrestling crossover. I think some of the criticism there has been, you've got no fans in the arena, it's very quiet, you can hear everything that's going on, there's no atmosphere there, it does feel very cold, it does feel very clinical, as it were, and that's an issue for some people. But I felt that even just having that crowd noise, it wasn't as maybe sophisticated as WWE's, and it wasn't as obviously as live and raw as AEW's, because AEW obviously has the wrestlers surrounding the ring and actually fans in the audience there, so you don't have that noise, as it were. But I felt just by having some crowd noise, even if it wasn't actually specific to what was really going on in the ring or specific to the spots, I thought absolutely massively benefited the show. So I thought that really did help Impact Wrestling a lot in terms of the presentation of the show, as it were, there. But once it got to the main event, because that's what we'll talk about here, that transitions into Impact Rebellion, I thought the main event was really good. I did think the main event was really good. Obviously, I know there was lots of discussion, obviously, about Alex Shelley not being able to be in the main event. Did it hurt the match? I still do think technically it hurt the match, because I think having Alex Shelley in there would have improved the match. But, and I mentioned this yesterday when I spoke about Kenny Omega pinning Rich Swann, which is what happened in the main event, I felt that Moose arguably was the MVP of the match. Arguably. I think some of the offense he was able to get in that match, he certainly... Again, as I mentioned, there was some discussion about should Moose be involved, is he the right person to be involved, but he was phenomenal. He really was phenomenal. If it's him hitting standing moonsaults in the ring, the jumping, he jumped to the top rope, hit a C4 onto Kenny Omega in the middle of the ring as well, which was incredible. I mean, the guy was absolutely phenomenal, and we didn't see Moose turn on this team either, which made Kenny Omega pinning Rich Swann even more meaningful. Kenny Omega pinned Rich Swann in the middle of the ring, fair and square, one-winged angel, that was it. And it's led to a lot of people saying, right, he's pinned the world champion. He's calling himself the real world champion. He's calling himself a collector of world championships. And on top of that, you see the Omega symbol there in the Impact Rebellion logo. It's pointing in all directions that we're going to see not only Kenny Omega competing at Impact Rebellion, but also we're probably going to have Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann taking place at that event. That, to me, looks the most likely scenario at this point, because if Kenny Omega is going to compete at Impact Wrestling going forward, who's he going to face? Who else is he going to face? He could obviously face Moose. He could obviously face maybe Chris Sabin, or if Alex Shelley's available at that period of time, maybe he could face him. But to me, the money match here always has been Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann. Not in the sense that because Rich Swann's this big star, I think he's getting there, and I think he does a very good job as Impact World Champion. There are still some doubters. There are still some doubters about his ability to be World Champion, if he should be World Champion or not. That's a discussion for another time, I think. But ever since we've had this AEW and Impact Wrestling crossover, one of the biggest things I have been saying is, in my opinion, I think the biggest match that AEW and Impact Wrestling can do is Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann. Why? Because it's AEW World Champion versus Impact World Champion. Champion versus champion. That sold the match itself at the weekend. Obviously, you had lots of facets that went into selling that match at the weekend. You had the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega making his Impact Wrestling in-ring debut. You had him teaming up with the Good Brothers once again, even though we had seen that on Dynamite this past week. And also you had, the Bullet Club being an Impact. You had it being on pay-per-view. All of that sort of stuff sold the match. But I think the biggest part of that match, excluding the Kenny Omega in-ring Impact debut, was that you had the Impact World Champion going up against the AEW World Champion in some form of a match. And I think that's the next step. That is the next step, is to have that champion versus champion match. Obviously, we've heard those reports as well for a while now at this point. I think Dave Meltzer was the first to report it, and frankly, he would know. He has very close ties to AEW. I know when Dave Meltzer does these reports on Impact Wrestling, there are some people that criticize him and say he's not that accurate when it comes to Impact, but what he is very accurate in, you have to give the devil his due, is AEW. Why? Because he has very close ties to AEW, whether it's Tony Khan or Kenny Omega himself, they have very close ties to AEW. So when he says that Kenny Omega is going to be competing in future Impact pay-per-views and in other matches inside of the Impact Zone, inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, I tend to believe him, and I've always felt that probably was going to be the case going forward, and I think that is the case, as evidenced by Kenny Omega's logo being involved there on the Impact Rebellion logo. So to me, that seems like the next step. Now, in terms of between now and then, are we going to see Kenny Omega on Impact Wrestling television? I think we are. I think that's very obvious that we are, because, of course, Kenny Omega was at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view on Saturday, therefore he would be available and would be at Skyway Studios in Nashville, Tennessee for the TV tapings that are going to be taking place over the course of the next few days, including Impact Wrestling on Tuesday night on Access TV. So I think we're going to see a lot of Kenny Omega over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks. We're certainly going to see a lot of him on this road to Rebellion in April, and I think that road to Rebellion is going to include Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship, possibly the AEW World Championship too. That is a possibility as well. But you have to look at what happened. You have to look at what happened at Hard to Kill on Saturday. Kenny Omega pins the Impact World Champion. He's calling himself the real World Champion. He's calling himself a collector of championships. All of this, to me, points to a Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann match. That's the money match. That's the money match. And I questioned before, when we spoke about this match being a possibility in the future, I questioned when could this match realistically happen, because obviously there was discussions about maybe AEW Revolution in February. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I mentioned Slammiversary in July. I just felt like holding off to July was too long to wait when it comes to this Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann match. So to me, it made the most sense to be somewhere in between, and that's what it was, Impact Rebellion. Impact, as we know, have gone back to this quarterly pay-per-view model. They've done it for quite a few years now, where you've got Hard to Kill in January, Rebellion in April, you've got Slammiversary in July, then you've got Bound for Glory in October. So to me, it makes the most sense for the Kenny Omega Rich Swann match to happen at Rebellion, and considering the outcome of Hard to Kill on Saturday, considering what we've been told in terms of this storyline so far, that makes the most sense for it to happen at Rebellion. Now, one name, of course, we mentioned earlier was Moose. We do have to talk about Moose in that sense, because Moose is going to be facing Rich Swann at some point for that Impact World Championship. Now, I know they were tag team partners on Saturday, but afterwards, Impact have posted this onto their social media accounts, that after the match was done, they were interviewing Rich Swann backstage. Moose interrupted interrupts, and then Moose attacks Rich Swann. And of course, we know coming out of Genesis, when Moose faced Willie Mack in an I Quit match, Moose was destroying Willie Mack, and it got to Rich Swann, Willie Mack's best friend, coming out to the ring and pleading with Moose to stop. He said, look, if you say you quit, I'll give you a future Impact World Championship opportunity, and that's just what happened. So Moose does have a future Impact World Championship opportunity. He did attack Rich Swann after Hard to Kill on Saturday, so the Moose versus Rich Swann match is coming soon as well. So I guess the question would be, actually, when it comes to Impact Rebellion in April, is who actually is Kenny Omega going to face off against? Is he going to face off against Rich Swann, or is he going to face off against Moose for the Impact World Championship? And I don't really know the answer to that one. I think you have to look at the push that Moose has been getting on Impact Wrestling television as of late, and you would probably say, well, that would lend you to suspect that Moose is probably going to win the World Championship. We've been conditioned to think that Moose is going to win the World Championship ever since coming out of Bound for Glory when he defeated EC3, and then on top of that, he's been feuding with Willie Mack. He, at the end of Final Resolution, handed the title to Chris Bay to Rich Swann. He also, as I mentioned, was after the Bound for Glory on the post Bound for Glory episode of Impact Wrestling, confronted Rich Swann backstage. The whole reason he was feuding with Willie Mack is because he was feuding with the best friend of Rich Swann. So this has been building for a while. We've been conditioned for a while to know that Moose is going to ultimately probably win the Impact World Championship and unify it with the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. That's the whole reason the TNA World Heavyweight Championship was brought back in the first place, was to eventually get to the picture of Moose holding up both the TNA World Heavyweight Championship and the Impact World Championship and unifying them and putting them together. He's been calling himself all of that kind of stuff, like the real world champion also. So you've got this situation where you've got Moose calling himself a world champion. You've got Rich Swann being the Impact World Champion. You've got Kenny Omega, the AEW World Champion, calling himself the real world champion as well. Could we potentially, I suppose, get to a situation at Impact Rebellion whereby you have 3 titles on the line? Kenny Omega's calling himself a collector. You have the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega versus the Impact World Champion Rich Swann versus the TNA World Heavyweight Champion Moose. Now that would be interesting. And you do have to discuss, which match would you rather see? Would you rather see Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann for both the AEW and Impact World Championship? Or would you rather see Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann versus Moose for the AEW World Championship, for the Impact World Championship, and the TNA World Heavyweight Championship? If Kenny Omega's calling himself a collector, that's not a bad haul. That in one night you could win 2 championships, 2 world championships. That'd be pretty impressive. I think personally, thinking about it out loud now, I think that triple threat main event to me seems like a way bigger main event than the singles main event. I think personally, obviously the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at the moment isn't a real world championship, but nevertheless, that it's, to me, it would be interesting. To me, that seems very interesting, and it's certainly something I think that Impact Wrestling might be considering in the future. I think it's a possibility. I think Moose is involved here somehow. We just don't know. But coming out of Hard to Kill on Saturday, we know a couple things for certain. We know that Kenny Omega pinned the Impact World Champion Rich Swann clean in the middle of the ring, and we also know that at Impact Rebellion, it looks like Kenny Omega is going to be appearing because of that Omega logo. So anything can and probably will happen over the course of the next few weeks, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more Kenny Omega on Impact Wrestling going forward. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Impact Rebellion being announced and that Kenny Omega logo being involved in the Impact Rebellion logo? What do you think that means for Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling going forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, WWE, AEW, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community below. Drop a comment. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video as well, please do smash a like on the like button. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get to people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.